Hey, 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 what is up, guys? Brandon Hicks here with the Orange Guild, and tonight we're going to be doing some more celebrity sculpting. So, if you didn't see what I shared on Facebook before we get started, let's talk about what happened last week. So, we got some reference together, but we only had one image. We had a frontal image of Angelina Jolie. We started sculpting. Now, we had some issues. And before we get started, let's take a look at where we ended up. So let me switch my monitor here. Okay, so we're in Blender 2.8. We got my reference up here in the upper right hand corner. And yeah, so all we had was this far left image to go off of last week. So if we zoom in on that, you can kind of see what that looks like. And from the front, it's not too bad. You know, it doesn't look like a train wreck necessarily. It kind of looks like we were heading in the right direction. But we start spinning around, and very quickly it starts to fall apart. And this is because we didn't have any data to go off of. So if you look at all of the other angles right off of, straight on the face, the further we get off axis towards the side profile and everything else, the harder it is to really nail down, what this is supposed to look like. And that's the reason why it all just falls apart. So we need to have some more reference to go off of. And tonight we're going to look at, if you've hit this point in another sculpt you've been working on, we're going to look at how to go back, take a few steps back, and not start over completely, but just let's tweak some things. Let's try to fix this and fix it up. So here's what I did. I got apart from the front side, I got a 3/4 view, or as close to a 3/4 view as I could get, and then I have a side profile view. Now, this is available in the downloads underneath the stream. So tonight, if you look at, this is sort of what I see, but you guys are going to have a section down below where the comments and everything go. And in the description, you're going to see a downloads resource to a Google Drive folder. Somebody that is watching, just go ahead and pop in there and try to download the image that I uploaded. And just let me know if that's working, because if it's not, I want to go ahead and fix that for you guys while you're watching. And so yeah, that's how you can get a hold of the reference that I am using there. Okay, so let's talk about, before we jump in and get going on fixing things, let's talk about some other things with 2.8 that we didn't necessarily cover last time. So one of the big features that's new in 2.8 is the ability to have these different sorts of layouts. Now, we sort of had this in the past, but these are much more sophisticated tab layouts that allow you to see all of them at once. They've already got a bunch of preset ones in here for specific tasks, and it's a little bit different than it used to be. So I was using the default layout, but there's actually one already set up for sculpting. And so if you just cycle through these, you can see it totally rearranges the windows. And if you switch to the sculpting one, it's automatically going to switch you into a matte cap there. So that's probably what we should be doing, is utilizing the new interface to sculpt with. So I'm going to do that. I'm also going to switch back to sort of the matte cap gray. And let's try this one, because I like that one a little better. And let's take a look at what we need to do. Now, I lost my little preview window, so I'm going to jump back into the UV image editor. And at the top, I want to grab my reference here, and there we go. So one of the other things we need to make sure is that we have our webcam lined back up properly. So let me go ahead and fix this really quick. And let's toggle this off. Okay, so back to normal. Okay, so what's great about having all three of these images is that they give us a complete profile of what the head's supposed to look like, because basically, even though we only have one side, we really have kind of, based on symmetry, what the other side's ballpark's supposed to look like. And just from these three, the more you have, obviously, the better. But with these three, you're you're pretty golden. You've got a good starting point. So what I've done is I've jumped into Photoshop and I've scaled all of these images and lined them up so the eyes are approximately the same size, they're in the same place horizontally, and in case you're wanting to do this for yourself, that's all I really did. Made sure I cut everything out so it wasn't overlapping, all that. Okay, so that's the setup for tonight, and I'm listening in the chat too, so if you guys have any questions as we get going, or just want to talk about sculpting people in general, go ahead and jump in and talk, and I will be watching. So one of the big things we need to kind of reconsider is, last time we were focused more on how to get started and using just one profile image. Obviously, we're not going to be in a great position to guess at the rest of this. So the structure is a bit off. And what I want to do at this point is kind of go back and rework her underlying facial structure so that we're positive that the shape of the head in general is kind of in a good place before we get really going here. So I'm going to do a lot of sort of destruction in the first part of this just to kind of get it back to a place where I feel like we have a good foundation. So if you're at a place where you have to do this, it's a little scary if you've spent a lot of time working on something, but it's good practice to be able to kind of go back and forth. So one thing I'm going to do is make sure I have her face selected because I have a few separate meshes. One is just the hair, as you can see, and then I have her eyes are separate, and then her face is separate, as you can see here. So we want to make sure that's selected before we jump back into sculpt mode. For whatever reason, dynamic topology is continually being disabled. I don't know if that's a bug. Usually this only happens when you have sort of like vertex colors, UVs, stuff like that. But as far as I can tell, I don't have any here. So if you guys have heard anything about why that might be happening, because as you can see, there's nothing there. Yeah, let me know because I'm sure it's probably just a bug right now that they have to fix, but kind of sucks because I have to remember to re-enable that every single time we jump back into sculpt mode. So yeah, there's a lot changing in 2.8, and it's still alpha. We have to remember that, so it's not gonna be perfect. But we want to start using it because this is the way things are gonna be. We want to embrace it, and we want to be able to catch up and learn as we go. And the quicker you jump in, download the preview version, and start playing around, the easier it's gonna be to adapt. So let's go ahead, and we've turned up our details percentage a little bit here. I'm going to go ahead and let's just pick scrape up. And what that's doing is if I switch into sort of wireframe here, you can see that it's just simplifying the topology and reducing the poly count. And that's really all we are trying to do at first, because we're going to want to really take out a lot of this detail that we added last week and kind of redo it. So I'm just gonna kind of go over the whole base of the face to begin with. The further we zoom out using our settings here with brush detail, the lower poly things are gonna get. And we're occasionally gonna have some problems where it can't resolve if we're trying to kind of reduce the polys too quickly, things like that. So just open up the remesh menu down there, and you can either resymmetrize or you can just optimize, and that will clean that up for you as you're kind of decimating there. So I'm not worried about, the eyes are in the head and all that, and, it's something that we're going to have to fix, but not right away. So symmetry over X symmetry should still be turned on. So anything we're doing to one side should be automatically being done to the other. If you're seeing that there's some things that are off symmetry wise, you just hit the symmetrize button and it will go ahead and resymmetrize for you. So now we are low poly enough that we should be able to start moving things around again. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump into sort of a front view here. And typically you want to stay in out of orthographic mode when you're sculpting. But since we're just going to be trying to nail proportions down to begin with, and this is more of an orthographic type view anyways, I want to go ahead and try to match up her facial profile with the reference. So I'm just going to be doing a little bit more time up front right now, kind of playing with this. And I'm simplifying these features by holding shift to smooth this area out. And the first thing we're going to do before we start really worrying about structure is just refining the volume a little bit so that it is, you know, a little bit better as we get going here. So occasionally I'm just going to continually to recheck that our dynamic topology is either on or off depending on what we want, because again, it's being a little buggy right now. And so again, it's about proportions at this point and starting to refine structure and get those basics down. So from the outside in, we're going to go from general to specific. And what I'm really concerned about right now is the outside profile of her face. So we're going to try to reshape a lot of her jawline going around and just make sure that is in a good place from the front. Now, we did a lot of this last time from the front, so a lot of this may be okay, but we just want to double check right now and see if we're good here. So if we think that we're good, we can go ahead and let's move to the side right now. So I'm at 3 on the keyboard. And now we can go ahead and say, since we didn't have this reference last time, where do we go wrong? Because there was a lot that just didn't end up working out for us. So I don't want to move up and down very much at this point because we've already defined from the front how that needs to look. What I'm really looking for at this point is depth. So we need to take the back of the jaw, move that where it needs to be back here. And the under part of the chin needs to be sort of refined a little bit. So the front part height-wise is probably good, but we're going to want to pull this bottom part out so that it is more in line with where it should be. The rest of the jaw is going to come down a little bit. I'm just sort of nudging in place. Occasionally I'll hold shift and just kind of reposition. And if you need to kind of rework some of the geometry, just grab another tool like clay or clay strips, either way. And you can just kind of lightly brush back over with a smaller percentage there to add back in some of that geometry. So when you smooth, you'll see it cleans back up rather well, and then you're good to go. And it doesn't take much. I'm barely tapping to redistribute the geometry there. So let's kind of look at her chin here. Smooth a little bit. G for grab. And okay. So now, instead of moving around a little bit here, what I'm going to do is grab the clay strips brush and just start kind of working around. And I want to get a basic structure laid down, so we're not going to focus on you know, details like the eyes, the nose, the mouth right now. What we're going to do is focus on what those sit on top of. So it's basic skeletal features, structure, things like that. So I'm going to pull back a little bit on this reference till we can see from a distance what all 3 of these look like. At this point, I'm out of orthographic mode into perspective mode. And tonight, rather than last time, I'm going to continue to save throughout the stream. Okay, so we are going to kind of carve in here, and remember that these are kind of reversed. Again, not sure why that's happening right now, but control is minus if you have the plus on. And so that will go ahead and dig some of those cavities in there. We want to refine sort of some volume for the nose. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some basic structure there for the mouth and the chin. And what I really want to do is make sure that we are getting those planes of structure in. So as far as the face goes, we're going to want sort of a 1, 2, 3 read. So the front face is going to be sort of a big wedge going down from the top. So we're going to want to bring that down here. And then we're going to have sort of a flatter portion going down as it curves around. And what's really important here is figuring out this draft angle from the front to the back, because you don't want it flat. You want it to really be differentiated in the way that it is sort of working there. Okay, so and now we start getting closer to where we want to be. I'm going to zoom in on this 3/4 view, and we're just going to make sure that we have our alignment set up correctly for the curvature around this face. So you can see there's a lot of movement here in these facial planes, and we want to make sure we get a decent look at this angle. And from there we can tell, okay, well, the eyes are going to need to go way further in. Cheeks are going to come down further, like that. We can smooth on the other side at the same time to kind of fix some of this as we go. And then the mouth is going to curve in down here before we hit the chin. So now you can see that curvature is a lot more refined, sort of like it was in the reference here. Move up a little bit. Really want to get those brows sort of defined. You can see it's got sort of a constant angle protruding up through the forehead all the way to the hairline. So we want to pull that out, smooth that back. I'm going to quickly jump into the hair and kind of move it out of the way. So I'm going to switch into wireframe view here and grab our brush, make it a little bigger, and I'm just going to pull our hair in so that it's not going to be intersecting with the rest of the face and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so now it should be pretty well tucked out of the way. Smooth that a little bit, and there we go. Now we're good. Okay, back into our face sculpt mode here. Turn back on our dynamic topology. There we go. Okay. So now again, it's a game of tug of war. From the side, that looked decent, but now from the front, we're gonna have to decide what we're gonna need to smooth out there. So I'm gonna pull that down a little bit. And you know what's really interesting here is asking yourself the question, based on needing to have this angle profile stay where it is in terms of this curvature, what can I change from the front view that will allow that curvature to stay the same? So if I move something around, such as this eye socket, is that going to change that side profile? And in this case, it probably won't. So this tells me, this feels wrong, but I know for a fact, just from what little I know about anatomy, that the eye socket really does need to go that far back on the face. So we had that wrong last time because we didn't have this depth information to go off of. So let's move over to the side where it's a little easier to match this up. Let's grab that nose, bring that back out. And we're just subtly kind of nudging things around here. Eventually we will switch back into clay strips. And here's where we need to kind of start making some differentiations. And I'm just building up these layers on the face here. So we don't want the lips to be defined yet. We just want a mask for the lips to sit on. So we got some structure there. And then now that that is sort of there, we can pull the lips out of that. But that's all we need right now. And then we want the same thing for the nose. We want a basic surface that we can pull the nose out of. Something like that seems good. And now we really want to define the area around the eyes. So we're going to want to make sure that from the front, we've got the width right on the bridge here for a starting point. And then we want to start measuring from the bridge over to this part of the eye where the lashes sort of end, or the edge of the tear duct here. How far out does that go? How does that line up with the brow line as we see here? And do we have enough musculature going on to match that up? If I rotate into a view that's closer to this view, I'm going to go ahead and move my reference over, pay attention to that, and just try to get this into a place where we're sort of seeing the same thing we're seeing in the reference. Okay. So obviously we need to sort of move this area in so we can line that up. Got some problems with extra clay in here, so let's grab this clay strip and we're going to do a negative sort of subtractive operation, dig that in over there. Sort of a flatter part of the nose. So looks bad. We got some weird, angry, facial stuff going on here. But remember, we're not focusing on details right now. We're just focusing on getting these planes of the face sort of defined. So we're gonna get these big masses where they need to be. We're gonna continue to use our move brush to make sure we are sort of happy with this brow line, where that's going. You can really start seeing the skeleton start coming through here. But remember, we're going to add muscle, we're going to add tissue back on top of that, and that's really what's more important right now. Is if we could see through to the skeleton, if we had an actual x-ray, it would almost be better to build that first and then kind of go back in and worry about how the rest of this is lining up. Okay. All right, so now we can kind of go in. At first, I'm going to dig away so that I know that we have as much room as we need to have here. And then we can go ahead and start building that eye cavity back up and around this eye socket. And remember, there's a lot of pieces to the eye here that we're going to want to play with. So we're going to leave room and time for us to kind of refine those lids and all of that. But right now, we're not really worried about how all that looks, because it can be a little misleading for the rest of our face if we get on there right now and we start detailing out all that stuff. So the only thing I'm really going to do here is I'm going to throw in a crease where the under part of her eye sort of bag is right there. Just as some reference so we can measure where that needs to go. And now we're going to be back to looking at her brows. Let's pull back, make sure our camera positioning is correct here. So we should be seeing the corner of her eye. And you know, that tells me that right there, we probably need to be a little further out with either the placement of the eye width or definitely the height of the brow. So I'm going to grab this here and I'm going to push this up. Grab the clay strips, and I know that this needs to be out a little more, so on this side I'm going to add in some of that clay. Smooth. There we go. We got that line back kind of where we got it. That's good. A little bit more brow bone coming through there. So let's grab our crease brush again. Let's go in here. I want to separate this sort of upper eyelid from the brow bone. So I'm going to pull that in quite a bit here. You'll notice there's quite a big cavity in here. So we want to deepen that in as much as we need to kind of get that in place. Okay, so you can see there's quite a bit of difference here in the underlying structure of the face at this point. We've taken the time to really kind of make sure that that's proportionally where it needs to be. We've started to work out those angles from side to the front and started to kind of get the eyes, those planes worked out. Okay, so I'm going to build up a little bit more of this lower eyelid. Quickly do a remesh here. And so I'm looking at the lower part of her iris and the upper part of her iris to see where those need to line up on the eye. And last thing we want to do here is sort of flatten out this area. So I'm going to grab the flatten brush here. Let's try the scrape brush. Yeah, that's what we want. Scrape brush is great for just kind of removing volume, chipping away there. Rounding stuff off if you need to, that's good. Okay, let's zoom in just a little bit here, and I want to give myself a little bit of clay to work with for that under eye section so we can flatten back down. Now, we've got some got some problems in that we need to come off a little further over here before we flatten. And let's jump back in and give ourselves a ridge here. Carve back in, straighten that up on this side. And okay. So that's a good starting point, I think. Now we've got some clearly defined lids at least to get started with. We can go to the side here and really start to get an idea of how well we're doing by how it lines up on this. So here's what I'm trying to figure out is the alignment. So starting with the ridge of the nose, we can get the grab tool again. Let's go for a bigger brush size, and I want a more defined ridge there. I want to bring the ridge of the brow back a little bit, and then make sure the distances from here to here are wide enough, because what we definitely have that we don't really want right now is we've got some planes that aren't sort of lined up with where they should be. So we're going to rebuild the structure in here. So zoomed out a little bit. Let's simplify this and let's rebuild. Start with the grab brush. Let's pull this back. And you can see how far in this kind of dips. Now it's soft, but it's there. And do the grab brush again. Edge of that eye really needs to be wrapped out to about there. Now I can't tell depth-wise what's happening, so we're going to have to rotate around and play with this a little bit more. But what I'm noticing is just go for the straight line to measure how far off this needs to be. You see her eyebrow and how it curves up like this. If we take the top of where the upper eyelid is supposed to stop, that's kind of where the beginning of the brow bone starts protruding, then we know how far we're off here, because we've got a lot of undershadow, which is telling us, there's quite a big, sudden change in form here. And this is a lot flatter right here. So we don't really want that. Now she's got her eye in a different position here. She's got her eye closed, but it's the same basic idea. Her brow bone is not really going to move. So gonna get that locked in there. Okay, so that width there matches a little bit better. That's kind of what we want. Let's grab the crease here. Or not crease, pinch. Zoom in a little bit more, and I want to really pull this edge out. Pull that out with the clay strip, grab the pinch again, and we're going to line that up down here, just like that. Now we'll grab our scrape, flatten this down at a more extreme angle here. If that's not working, grab the grab brush. Just kind of start nudging this around a little bit. Okay, it's a little better. So let's make sure we're still lined up where we need to be here. Okay. What's up, Jason DS? I see you in the chat. What are you working on in Blender right now? Okay, I want to bring this in. You see our eyelid with the way this extra sort of form of skin is coming off. It's separating a little bit right here, and we got a little bit of a bulge out. So I want to correct for that. And then if we get crease brush, we can kind of put that line back in. You can see how that comes down. Okay, so measuring from the center of her the eye to start. So again, you can see it's already getting a little too busy here, a little too complicated. We don't really want to do all of that right now. So let's just make sure we're focusing. Okay, we got that. Oh, animation, very cool. I am not doing that right now, but good luck on that. Animation is fun and challenging. Okay, so one of the things I also want to be sure of before we get too far into this is that my eyes are actually where they need to be. So we had talked about earlier, they may not be far enough out, and I'm not really sure. So we need to pause for a minute, line up our our characters reference with our camera here, and just make sure we're happy with the spacing. So at this picture, she may not be looking straight on. She may be looking a little bit to the left. Doesn't really matter because we're not going to pay attention to her iris as much as we're going to pay attention to where those sort of are sitting in her face. I think they're probably okay right there. But we can definitely tell from that sort of view that we need to work on the shapes here a little bit more. Thanks, man. Last week was challenging, and this week we're just trying to get some basic shapes in so that we can move on to details later, because structure is what was missing last week. So, got a little too ahead of myself, wanted to move quick, and yeah, it's always a bad idea when it comes to this sort of stuff. You gotta take your time. Okay. So, just smooth it a little bit. Don't want to get too smooth happy because we want those angles to tell us where things are. So, don't want to lose all of these edges, but it's already looking a lot better than it did last week in terms of just the basic shape. I can tell it's three-dimensional. We can definitely tell a separation in the planes of the face, and I know that if we start hanging details and refinement on top of this skeleton, that it's going to work. So the only other big things we need to start focusing on now are, again, nailing the proportions when we start throwing in details. So like, we kind of know the eyes are sort of where they should be. The brows are probably okay. The real question is like, are we happy with where her forehead is? Does it need to get bigger? Because right now, it looks like it's a little bit, it's not big enough. So I'm gonna go to the grab brush, and we're gonna get a big fat grab brush, and we're just gonna kind of hike her forehead up a little bit. Now, when I do that, it's important that I don't lose my drafts and my angles. So we want a plane here, and we want a plane on the side, and we want to make sure that's working. So if we need to go back in and sort of reflatten a little bit, in fact, I'm going to use scrape instead. Zoom in a little bit so we don't start losing polys, but you can see a little bit of a 1, 2, 3 from left to right reading. So that's better. What's up, Voltaire? Good to see you in the chat. Happy you guys are hanging out tonight. Thank you for doing that on a Friday evening. All right, so we're fixing a lot of what we did last week. Now, we can already tell from our new reference. By the way, if you guys weren't in the beginning of the stream, you can download this image in the comments. So if you guys want to do that and let me know if that's working for that link, that would be awesome, because I want to be able to get you guys these files. I'll be uploading these blend files when we're done with the stream tonight, so you guys can download those. And that should be up a couple of hours after it processes on YouTube's end. So, okay, now the ear is going to be lined up top of it right about the line of her eye. So if you look here, you got the end of her tear duct right there. And if you draw a straight line, that's pretty much the top of her ear. So we really got this wrong in terms of the placement of the hair. So I'm not going to do a bunch of ear stuff right now, but I am going to draw a little bit of a volume there so we can kind of just ballpark where that needs to be. So let's grab clay strips. Starting right about there is where we're going to want those ears to be. And that means we can tweak the hair now a little bit just to make sure we've kind of repositioned that hairline. So I'm just using clay strips. We're drawing, and this is just a mesh that's sort of laying on top of our head sculpt, and it's sort of intersecting. So if I switch into wireframe, you can see that it's just a big ball that we have thrown a bunch of strokes on top of, and that's kind of giving the impression of hair. But that's really all we need to get started with. Okay, that's where the ear should be. That's it. Until we're done and ready to get details in, then this is as far as we really need to go. Okay, so let's switch back to our head. I'm gonna get a drink of water real fast. Reposition. I've been sitting in the same spot for about an hour now. Good posture, guys. It's important. Okay. Same thing for the lower part of the features, and proportions at this stage are so incredibly important because when you get into start detailing details on the eyes and all these separate features of the face, you're done moving proportions around because it's going to be basically work you have to go back and redo if you have to move them around at that point. Jason has downloaded the link and says that it works. Thank you for that. And like I said, those files will be uploaded immediately after the stream. So go to the same link and in the same folder, and you'll see the blend files when I get done with tonight's stream at 9. But you won't have to wait for the video to process to get those. Okay, so let's make sure the jawline is structurally intact. Now hers drops about an inch or so below the bottom of her earlobe, squares off, and then moves forward. So there's a little bit of a dip low, but not as much as you would think. So it's more square than I would have guessed. And that's, again, why we're using reference. I'm going to grab the crease, lower the size a little bit, and we're going to kind of get that cavity in there with the crease brush. Smooth. And if you want to sort of ignore the ear right now and just draw through where that crease would be on the bottom of the jawline through to the neck, go ahead and do that. And you can see just the three-dimensionality that we're getting now versus last week. There's a lot of definition on these planes of the face, and that is what we want. Okay. Okay, so it's really tempting right now to move in and go, all right, we're good. Let's just start detailing. But before I do that, I want to pause and I want to make sure that we have triple checked our structure, our proportions before we move into getting some basic definition on the lips and refining the nose and all that kind of stuff, because that will it's tempting because you want to make her look like her as fast as possible, right? But if you jump in right away before you start taking it slow and doing all this boring stuff up front, you're never going to get close to looking like her, as you saw last week. So that's really important to do tonight. So let's start sort of in the middle of the face, work our way down to the bottom, and then hopefully we will be sort of in a good spot to jump into details. All right, so hey, what's up, Ellie? Yes, this will be available later on the channel, as all the live streams are on Friday nights. You gotta wait a couple of hours for YouTube to be able to process the video before it goes up, but it'll be available, last video that's uploaded on the channel. And as I was mentioning to everybody else, the downloads for tonight are gonna be in the link in the description. So you can already download this reference image here if you need that. If you want to follow along, we're going to be doing this for the next few weeks or maybe more, depending on how long it takes us to get this finished. And I'll be uploading the blend files as well, so you guys can play with those. Oh, okay, 3 a.m. Yeah, go get some sleep, buddy. I understand. Thanks for dropping in, though, and saying hello. All right, so back to the side here. Now, what I'm really concerned about right now is distance. So if we see the shape of the nose, right now it's coming straight in and it needs to drop a little bit. So you see it's at a, 20-degree angle downslope there. And it doesn't, the nostril end here isn't lining up straight across. It's at an angle. So we need to line where that's going to be up here as well. So if we draw a line with the clay strip just to kind of get that volume defined there as a reminder. Then we at least know that's kind of okay, well, that's good. And then the bottom of the nose is going to be a little bit flatter here. So again, not detailing, I'm just getting the silhouette in place from this side. Yeah, so that's a little better. We got this really harsh ridge going around, and that's sort of at a 45-degree angle. So if I rotate the face to about a 45, and then we lower the brush size a little bit, I'm going to hold control. I'm going to carve in a little bit with clay strips so that we get that plane right there. And that is what we need to make it sort of look like her nose from the side there. Okay, and then the distance from the bottom of her nose down to the top of her lip. So let's grab the bottom of her nose. It's again at a little bit of an angle, but not as much as we have there. So we're going to straighten that out a little bit. The bottom of her mouth is going to come in straight down, as we can see here, and her lips are going to be drawn on top of that. So I'm not going to worry about the lips right now, but I do need to measure those distances. So we got, it's not a flat plane, it's round, but it's not currently shaped the right way. So I'm going to pull a little bit of material out here, holding control, and that is going to kind of even out this area. So we got kind of a wrap happening around the face, just like that. That tucks behind the fat of her cheek, as you can see there. So instead of trying to do that with the clay strips, let's just grab the crease brush, lower the size, and let's pull that in like that. Just real subtle. Smoothing that out. Back to clay strips. Okay, so now we want just some basic material here for where her lips are going to go. And it's this sort of triangular wedge happening. So I'm not going to worry about one lip or the other. It's just going to be one giant piece of clay. And we need to make sure, we're going to zoom in a little bit. And I want to make sure the top of this lip starts at the right position. So lower the size. I would say, trying to find a curvature of the cheek that I can line this up with. Whoa. Okay, so that's probably good. And you'll notice that with the way her top lip is shaped, it comes out a little bit, but it's mostly in line with the rest of her upper lip. So we don't need this ridge here. We need to scrape that flat so that it blends in with the rest of the cheek. More like that. And then we can pull this back to the right position, make sure from the side angle that it is back far enough. So I will grab the crease, we'll draw in sort of where this lower lip needs to go, or the crease in her lip needs to go. So we're going to drop down. First I'm going to measure the outside. So we're going to drop from here to here. I'm concerned about this ridge down to there. Now, I'm getting some weird things happening with my crease, so I'm going to change my curve here. Let's try that. First, let's build up that upper lip a little more so we have something to dig into. Her lower lip's going to be even further out, like that. Okay, dynamic topology was off. That was the problem. Okay, I'm going to use pinch instead so that it comes out a little bit more. We're going to want a pretty sharp section here with the upper lip coming around and down to the side. It may be easier to do this too with a little bit of scrape. Yeah. Jason asks, so do you think that 2.8 is stable enough for a minor large project like an animation? I would recommend at this point definitely getting in and playing, but I don't want to make any promises. I mean, I'm working in it right now because I need to learn it. I need to pick it up so I can share it with you guys. But ultimately, none of my projects I'm working on right now, I'm not afraid to lose them. I'll put it that way. Now, there shouldn't be a problem if you move to 2.8 with a project, and then you keep with all the alpha versions to the beta versions to the final release next year, and you just keep using the same sort of path through to the next version, and you're moving forward in Blender versions, you shouldn't have a problem. But you can't start using 2.8 and then go back to 2.79 because nothing will work. So for the projects that I'm currently teaching with, where I have already started rendering, shading with materials and cycles, all that kind of stuff, I'm still using 2.79 to teach with all of those projects. All the commercial stuff I'm doing is 2.79. And it's going to stay that way until next year when they finally release the finished version. Just because, when you're working on stuff for clients, like you got to have a reliable solution, and who knows what they're going to break when they release the next feature in 2.78, 2.8, and that's a problem for me because I hate getting into projects and then, having things all just fall apart. So, not something I want to play with. But like I said, if you're just playing around and you're not going to be delivering to clients or whatever, feel free to jump in and play with it. Just don't try to go back and forth, because it will hurt you. Okay, so there's a few things we need to kind of think about here, and that is that the upper lip is really going to need to be split into a few different pieces. So we've got this center section, and then we've got these two side sections that need to have their own sort of definition here. And then this bottom section is going to have two big pieces. So we need to have a portion here and a portion on the other side. Now that's going to be mirrored, so it works out in this case, but just bear in mind that's kind of the breakup we want to have here is 3 on the top and 2 on the bottom. Oh, that's funny. Duck lips. Okay. Oh, yeah. That's not good. Okay, so we hit a place where we have a great example of something that is not working. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to back off. we obviously have something wrong with proportion or whatever. Maybe it's details. I don't know at this point, and I don't really care. I don't want to accept responsibility for this, so let's get rid of it. I'm going to turn up my detail percentage a little bit, and let's just go ahead and turn this back into one continuous piece there. Okay, so what went wrong? Let's double check our proportions. Let's make sure we have those lined out before we start getting in there and creasing and doing all that fun stuff. So let's look at planes. We have a very sharp hook here on the bottom of the top lip. How do I want to say this? Coming off of the nose straight down, there's like a little J hook here. So we want to make sure that's there. Big features. And to do that, I'm going to grab the clay strips brush. And then from this side, I just want to make sure it's looking good. So I'm carving in, carving back out, and if we need to, we can scrape, which is probably the better solution at this point, to flatten both of these areas out fast. So let's get a ridge, let's get our scrape, and then let's flatten. That's how we get that sharp hook there. Let's do the same thing up here on this section. Give her a little Hitler mustache, yay, and then scrape it back off. And that'll flatten this whole area back down to the same level. So now we got that really pronounced sort of hook in that corner. And okay, so let's lower that size a little bit. I'm going to dig a little lower here. And again, I'm going to measure distance again. So from the bottom of her nose, how far down do we need to go? So let's compare it to something that's close by. So how far is it from this inner corner here to the outer edge of this plane? That's pretty much a straight line. So how far is that distance? Is it the same as this? Is it shorter? I think it's a little bit shorter. Not much, but a little bit. So now we look at our model. Based on the distance between here and here, our ridge needs to start a little higher. It needs to start kind of up here. So I'm going to go to the front. Let's just take the grab tool, get it real big, and I'm just going to move this whole thing up. We'll just edge that up a little bit. Okay. So let's look at this profile again. Let's take the scrape. I'm going to rotate to like a 3/4, and let's scrape there. Still not as sharp as I would probably want, so we're going to play a little bit of back and forth at this point until we get this looking as pronounced as we want. So now that I've got all that clay there, let's scrape again. Make sure we get that hook where we want it. And yeah, it's a tricky area. Trickier than I would have thought, just because it seems so simple. It's just a couple of corners, but let's try crease, since we're not really getting the results that we're after. Okay, that's better. Not perfect, so let's pull that up a little bit. Make sure I grab that center piece, pull that up too, and then let's scrape again. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we got a really pronounced corner there. And the question is it coming out too far right here? So where is that lining up with her nose? Now, we don't have a nostril in yet, so let's go ahead and throw that in there. Just holding control here. Carving that into that there. And I'm just ballparking this right now. I haven't measured anything. I'm just trying to get the edge of this sort of lined up with where it should be. I think that feels right. Okay, let's grab this corner, a little bit bigger of a brush. Let's reshape this edge here. So I'm looking at the corners here and here. I'm trying to get those sort of dialed in there. And then by the time it gets back down, this sort of needs to flatten back out. So I think that's close. And then we don't have this sort of protrusion happening here yet, so we need to add that in. That connects back up with quite a bit more there. Okay, so that's going to drop. More like that. Okay, so now let's continue to work on the structure of this mouth. Big shapes first, even though we spent a lot of time getting that hook the right way. We're going to do the same thing with these big shapes here. So first of all, let's zoom out a little bit more. We'll start with the top of the lip. Let's measure down about how far this needs to go. And just putting some marks down so I can kind of measure this a little bit easier. Okay, so there's quite a bit more depth happening than I would have first thought. Her nose needs to come out a bit more. Just like that. Okay. That's in a good place. Let's pull her mouth, undo that. So measuring about how far out her bottom lip needs to go. Got a lot of material to work with, so we'll just scrape that back. Now this angle here, again, is just about as severe as the top angle. So we don't need to kind of be straight across like this ridge is here. It needs to be dropped down a little bit more like this one is. But you can see how far off we are on the chin just by seeing where this bottom lip really needs to come out to. And it actually needs to come out a little further than that based on where that center line is. So what we're not seeing right now is her center part of her lip curving in, which we need to see. So I'm going to pull that center line in a little bit, and then I'm going to reshape the front of her lip out a little bit more. So by the time it starts here, then when we scrape this, I'm just going to gently scrape from underneath so that it meshes back up to this top ridge. And then we're going to go around the face, doing the same thing all the way around the mouth until this merges back up back here. We need to fill these holes in, so I'm going to grab the clay brush, and that will kind of fill in those gaps. We can scrape again, but you can see how clean this line is from the side, kind of curving in. So she looks like she's had a collagen injection on our sculpt, and we don't want that. We want that to be more like that. We got a little bit of a curve straight down. So if we don't want to kind of have to tweak over and over again with the clay strips, we can just grab the inflate. Just gently kind of give full strokes from the center out towards the top, and that will kind of reshape and fill those lips back in with a little bit more puffiness there. Now what's interesting is her mouth actually has sort of an interesting line here in the way that it's split on the lips. It kind of tucks and does some interesting things. So what we're going to want to do, I'm not going to worry about the line right now. I'm going to worry about the lower lip and get that into a good sort of position, but we're going to need to go back in and kind of reposition this line as we go. So got the upper lip sort of where it needs to be. We're probably going to want to pinch and get this line back in here. Really get that defined. And then we can drop in the corner of her mouth a little bit more. She looks so angry right now. So now let's reposition all the big proportions underneath. So before we worry about our lower lip, look how much of her chin we have to reposition now, because we've started to measure. Everything up here is actually correct, but now we need to move down and give her a chin again because she lost it. So I'm going to drop down, and I'm just going to lower all of this material. And, you know, we'll smooth this back out, but okay, so here, we definitely need some more material. So I'm gonna keep adding layer on top of layer until we get back that extrusion of clay on the front, and see how much we have to add to get this roundness back up, lined up with her lower lip. Now remember, her lower lip isn't out as far enough as it needs to be yet. So just from point of reference here, the top lip needs to kind of stay where it is. But this bottom lip needs to be more kind of like that, which means her chin needs to start somewhere around there. And now we can start measuring based on that how we need to add this back in. Okay, so I'm going to smooth a little bit so it just doesn't look too crazy. And okay, so we got an extreme angle happening there. We know that her jawline needs to be lowered now because of where her mouth is. So let's grab the grab brush, do our job, pull that. It needs to actually be lower, a little lower than the mouth there. And we'll reshape the bottom so that we get that back in place. Now, it's looking terrible, and I get that, but remember, we gotta get the silhouette locked down before the rest of this is gonna work. So let's fill back in. Lower the dynamic topology. Smooth. Carve in a little bit more, redefine that jawline. Make sure we save. Okay. All right. So, still not looking perfect, but the proportions are definitely moving in the right direction. You look at the corner of her mouth here, and you go straight line all the way across. Then we know that her ear needs to be about a ½ inch away from that. So if we draw a straight line, her ear needs to come down. And then we draw a straight line, and we go, all right, how low do we go until that jaw starts to curve around? As if we line it up with the lower cleft of her bottom lip where it meets the chin, that's right about where it needs to start curving around. So here, and that's about lined up right, and so we're good. And now the only question is the angle correct from here down to here? So we have, what, 20, 30 degrees that we're looking at for that drop. And based on this position, I think we need to go a little lower. So we get a little bit of a smaller brush so we can draw a straight line. And make sure that that is looking good. Okay, so now I can start kind of smoothing that out a little bit. And really quickly, we've kind of fixed some of that. But now we need to kind of refine this section of her face. So, not perfect. The upper part's working, but the lower part needs to be kind of tweaked a little bit more. So, let's get the grab tool. I'm going to turn off dynamic topology because I don't want to ruin all these details. So, I'm going to grab a big grab brush, and I just want to lower that section a tiny bit.
Okay, now let's go in and let's start resimplifying because we got a lot of wrinkles and weird stuff happening. And again, we're still at the structure stage. We're still gonna be going in here and just planing out the face a little bit. So I don't want to worry about too much. I just want to kind of get this working. So if we need to add in some more girth for fat or muscle somewhere, then we can do that. If we're getting a little too bulky, then we can come back in here, sort of pull those back down. But ultimately, as long as the silhouette stays where it needs to stay, we're pretty good. So I'm going to grab clay strips. Let's just kind of make sure that we have enough movement in this 3D form to be working down here. I think we're getting there. I think from the front now, we're definitely going to have issues. So we've spent a lot of time looking at the side, and that's my fault. But let's go back to the front now and just make sure we're kind of happy with where we're going. Okay. So the shape of the head is kind of a little out of proportion here. So let's go ahead and fix that. Grab the grab brush again. Let's take out dynamic topology. Now, we talked earlier about her eyes not really lining up, and we can see now that a lot of that may have to do with the fact that her head starts a little wider at the top, and it angles in as you get down to the jawline. See, there's a little bit of a 20-30 degree draft going in. It's pretty 20 degrees maybe. It's pretty shallow, but it's there, and we don't have that at all. We have a straight drop from the top of her head to the bottom of her head here. So we're gonna grab a huge grab brush and just pull her face out a little bit. Now I don't want to mess with the height. I'm just going in and out this way because we've spent a lot of time getting her proportions set up correctly, and I don't want to mess with any of that stuff. So where's the bottom of her jaw? This should be back here somewhere. Let's pull that down. Start pulling that in. Somewhere around here. Now, her lips are also not as wide as they should be, so we'll focus on getting that right. Her nose is probably a little too wide, so I'm gonna go ahead and let's look. Yeah, it's a little too wide, so let's pull that in a little bit. We've got a little bit of a mismatch with her eyes. They're shaped a little bit more like sort of teardrops, flatter on the bottom. There's a little bit of curvature, but definitely a curve on the top. And we're missing a little bit of that shape here with the way that these are looking. So I'm going to carve back in here a little bit more. Let's resimplify. I want to flatten out the way this is looking here. Some big changes we're going to make there. Okay, so that's coming out. So we don't have dynamic topology turned on right now. I'm not really worried about that. Just kind of worried about getting this shape right here. Okay, so turn it back on at this point. Let's grab the crease brush. Once again, just really gingerly kind of throw in some separation there. so now let's focus on the nose. We haven't really focused on the nose that much. We need to mess with the proportions a little bit here. Got a little bit too much of a draft going on, so I'm gonna add some fat back into that section there of the nose. It's probably a little too much, so let's pull it back a little bit. Get the same thing happening here. A little bit too much taken out, so let's pull that back in. Now, from the front, it's very hard to tell what's going on with her structure of her nose. We can tell, you know, where the edges begin. They line up with the corners of her tear ducts. So that's about how far out we need to be going with her nose. So it's still a little wide. I'm going to fix that right now. So we'll fix that. The nostrils need to be, it makes a little sort of W shape here. If you look at the way that's looking. So let's make sure that's sort of working from the front. Undo that. And we've totally missed some structure there, so that's why it's looking really weird. So let's go to a 3/4 view. Let's assess what's going on. Okay, so it doesn't look like maybe that's coming out far enough. That needs to go in. And we need to, as I recall, reconfigure this nostril a little bit. So let's move that around now. Make sure we're lined up correctly with our sort of camera view, and then let's pull this back so that we have a really nice curvature like we have here. With that missing, it's going to be really hard to get this looking right. All right, so I'm switching back on the dynamic topology. The nose is a pretty complex, well, you know, every part of the face has got some complexity when you start comparing and stuff like that, but there's a lot of planes that you got to make sure are lining up correctly here to get this working. So I'm just trying to make sure we have the basic in and out working, and it's really hard because there's so little shadowing happening here because of these beauty shots that you really have to make sure you're paying attention to those subtleties. But I think that's pretty close. Now, I know that's off. Following the sort of musculature underneath and that jawbone or the cheekbone. try to get that sort of puffy part on the right section. And we want it to start and stop sort of in the right place. So right about there, you can see a faint line where that is beginning to rise off the rest of the facial plane. And then we look here, you can see about how far from the highlight that is traveling. And then that sort of just gracefully falls back into the rest of the skin here. So we're going to have to do a lot more refining on that, but that's basically what we need to get in there for this to start working. Yeah, that helped a lot. Okay, so back to the nose. Okay, so this whole bottom section of the nose here is coming out a little further than the rest of this nose ridge here. So we need to make sure that we've got a little bit more definition happening between this sort of more concave area, a little bit more of a ridge for the nasal bone, and then we've got this front section of her nose. Now, she's a very petite person, but there's still some extra cartilage around this part of her face, and we got to make sure, you know, we sort of get that in there. So I'm going to smooth out that front section. Do a quick smooth just to kind of soften those features up and see where we need to add and remove. We don't want to have any really defined lines on those planes. Now anything that is a little too heavy, we'll just scrape. I mean very subtly. Okay, let's soften this out. Let's go to the side, see what else we need to line up that is a little bit off. Okay. So the tip of this has gotten a little bit out of control, as we can see. So I'm going to scrape this down. Undo that. Lower this number a little bit more. Okay, so you can see I just flattened that out a little bit on the front of her nose. And we want a very flattened angle here. So you can track that. And then underneath, we want it even flatter than that. I'm going to do a little bit more towards the back than the front. And that should get that headed in the right direction. And then we can come around and just give ourselves a little bit of some help with the crease there. And now let's go ahead and do what we need to do. Grab the clay, fill back in if we need to a little bit, We're just pushing and pulling a little bit there. And let's scrape to flatten. Do a quick optimize. Okay, so one of the other things we kind of need to check at this point is proportion of these angles. So these are about the same distance apart from this corner to here to there and even to there. Those are about the same distance all the way around. So we need to make sure that's still happening for our structure on the nose. So I'm going to start here and let's work this angle and kind of go up. Let's smooth a little bit. Let's grab scrape. So you can see how angular this all really is. There's a lot of flatness and planes happening here. And they're subtle, but they're important. Okay, so we got a big difference here between the distance from here to here and here to here. And that's why this looks so weird. It's one of the reasons why that looks so weird. So we'll pull that down. Make sure that's all looking good. Okay, let's... So I'm sort of oversimplifying this right now, but it's important to kind of get these measurements correct, so that I'm sure that these are right. Yeah, that's looking good. So let's inflate a little bit because I'm losing some of the skin cartilage down here, and I want to be able to have some more to sculpt on. So I'll round that back out. Still got our little corner happening here, and that needs to go up to, let's see, probably about there. So let's do the grab. Sorry guys, not as much commentary happening tonight. It's a little hard to concentrate and talk the whole time. Okay, about as much as I can do with the grab tool. Back to scrape. Okay, now we know, based on all these measurements, we don't have enough skin on her nose because we know this line is a lot more straight here. So I'm gonna kind of deflate a little bit around here. Scrape that transition down a little bit. But for the most part, now we have our proportions sort of worked back up. I'm just still using the clay brush with control. That's helping me get some more edges sort of defined in here. Doing a little bit what the scrape brush does for me. So I kind of like that. Okay, let's grab the inflate brush again. Let's go around this outside edge, make sure we've got enough sort of bulge happening down here. I think that's good. Smooth a little bit. Okay, so a lot happening with the nose. A lot happening with the nose. And it's good, but I wanna smooth this out a little bit. So I'm holding shift and I'm very lightly going across and softening these features back up. Okay, that's better. Now, we still have a problem with our nostril. It's very much not lined up correctly. So we need to get the grab tool. And again, I'm going to turn off dynamic topology. And we need to fix this. So let's use the mask tool. Let's grab where we want the nostril to kind of go up into the nose a bit more. And then I'm going to say Control I. Let's use the grab, turn on dynamic topology. And we're just going to grab and pull up into the nose. Just like that. Alt-M to clear the mask. And we can go back to clay. Okay. It's a little bit better there. So now let's go ahead and pull the bottom of this nostril around. I want to connect this up. So you can see the skin really connects all the way around, and that's kind of a huge part of what we were missing before, was not having this little ridge run between these two. So definitely need to connect these up. And yeah, that makes a big difference. Just grab. Okay, so top of the nostril here goes across, not quite lining up with the front tip there, but pretty close. So let's line that up. That's about right. Okay, grab a clay strips brush. We're going to kind of get this all lined out now. All right, let's round this off. Okay, once again, a little crazy. So, smoothing. Pull some of those wrinkles out of her nose. All right, let's do some basic proportional checks at this point. We've talked a lot about details tonight with the facial features. So distance from eye, center of the eye down to maybe the nostril here. We're about lining up the back end of the nostril to where this eyelash would be. Pretty close. I think the face is probably, or the head, especially where the ear's lining up, is way too far back. We need to pull that forward. So what I'm going to do is grab the mask brush. Let's box select here. And gonna control and drag to soften that edge up a little bit more. Now what I want to do is kind of move this whole back end of this head further in. So I'm going to grab tool, huge brush. Let's turn off dynamic topology. Jason says, are you going to retopologize after sculpting? You know, I might if we end up trying to rig this. Maybe if I need to texture it. But this may end up just being a study, so not sure yet. Okay. Let's go back to the mask tool. Back to the grab tool. All right, so let's look from the front of the nose to the back of the eye, and then from there to the front of the ear. is how far apart is that distance? Maybe a little more on here to here. So big question is, are we close to that? Still don't really have that angle perfect there. That needs to come back a little bit more. Just smooth that up for now because we don't need to worry about those details. And let's clear the mask. And I will go back through with a clay strips. And we got, do we have dynamic topology turned on? Let's turn that on. And we're gonna use that to help us redistribute those polys. So now if we smooth, it should reconnect the face without so many problems. Okay, so big strokes. We need this cheekbone to go out. We need this part of the face to go in, concave, as you can see there. And then we need the jawline to sort of come up and connect. Soften this up here. I think proportionally we're getting there, but it's still feeling a little off. So yeah, that's better. All right, now let's look again. Okay, so on the side, things from here to here look correct as far as the spacing, but what we're missing here is the overall proportion from the top of the nose down to the bottom of the chin relative to the rest of the face. So even if this is spaced correctly in terms of the scale here, it's not spaced correctly in terms of the rest of the face scale. So we got to scale this entire section down to match the rest of the face. So I'm going to line this up according to the front view here, and that will help me kind of see what's going on. Now again, we are mostly concerned with from here to here in terms of the overall size. So what I'm going to do is use the mask tool to grab what I want to scale. Fahim, what's up, man? Great to see you in the chat. I'm going to have to log off because I am now at 9 o'clock. But that is what's up. That is why this is not working. Got to scale this down. Okay, so I'm gonna hold control and just slightly kind of brush this in and out because I don't want this to be a really sharp mask. So we're going to taper that in so it's pretty gentle. And then we're going to shrink the rest of this down. So Control I to invert. And I want to go ahead and grab. We could try to deflate. So let's say we make this really big. Turn off dynamic topology. Hold Control. Could try deflating, but it's not really doing it for us. So instead, let's try to grab. We could also try to snake hook. So maybe we'll just see. Okay, grab seems like it's doing an okay job. So let's switch back to the front view. And now let's look at our reference and see how this is lining up. Okay, so from the bottom of where the nose ends to the bottom of the top part of the lip. Gotta remember we haven't really worked on this area, but we're looking at this distance here. So a little hard to tell with the masking, but we want to try to match that up as best as we can. So it's about the same height as the bulge of the nose where that starts down to the bottom of the nose. Which it's about there. Mouth is about the same distance there. And then the chin is definitely going to need to come up. Okay, so let's take our scrape here, lower the size. Okay, may have some masking going on there, so I'm going to unmask everything. While we're at it, let's turn back on dynamic topology and let's optimize our mesh. Smooth. working. It's working. Okay, so we got a little split down the middle of the lip. You can't see it a lot there, but that's definitely what we want. And we got flatten this section here. Okay, so let's quickly try to get the lips in a better place before I sign off tonight. But we're in a way better position than we were when we ended last week, so that's good. Okay, I'm gonna smooth that all out. See, we got a little bit of some upside down curvature there. There's really not too much of a gap here. It's pretty flat. Now, we can double check that from the side. But yeah, it's not a huge, inset. So what we really need is to flatten that out. There's a little bit more definition on that lip right there, that section. But that's really all we need. Okay. Now, what I'm also noticing is that if we look at the front, we got way too much concave, sunken in cheeks there. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn down the detail. Just fill that back in a little bit. She's not an old woman, so I don't want to make her look terrible. Whoa. Okay. Alright, that's looking a lot better. Okay, got a little problem here. Let's just click optimize and hold shift and smooth that back out. Okay, her lower lip is not nearly as full as it needs to be, so let's go ahead and fatten that up a little bit. You'll notice that crease running down the middle, and that's where you see the section splits like I was talking about earlier. So we need to sort of separate that out, smooth it a little bit. Okay, and then down here, we need to blend that back in. So we'll add some clay. Okay, that's looking better. We'll smooth a little more. Smooth a little more. And you can see from that profile angle, we're just kind of rounding that back out. And then we want to do the similar thing for the lips. So the lips will have a big section in the middle and then two sections sort of on the side. So for that, we will sort of draw this here. We can crease in a little bit if we need to, and then we'll come back out. These are a little bit more elongated on her lips. Now that's really exaggerated, so we're gonna need to dial this back a little bit, but easily done. Okay, so those look a little better, and we can work on those more, but got some lips in place now. Okay, so the last thing I want to do is really make sure we have her silhouette nailed down, because next week I want to start working more on getting her facial features in a better place. So I'm going to take the grab tool. Again, we don't need dynamic topology on if we're going to move big chunks around after we've done detail. So it's just going to get rid of stuff. So what I'm looking for here is the curvature of that jawline, and I want to lock that down. So anything in here that's sort of distracting, I'm going to remove that. If we see anything big that needs to change, we can tweak that as well. Maybe inflate that chin a little bit. Let's check it from the side. Yeah. Okay. It's more rounded off. That's better. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to overinflate a little bit, and then I want to go in and I want to flatten back down. So I'm going to hold Control and just gently push that back. Now you see what that did? That sort of got us that straight line that we needed right there. Now that curvature is matching up a little bit better. So now let's take our grab tool, take the bottom here, pull that up as needed. It's a little bit better. Got our jawline sort of defined and back where it needs to be. Okay, back to a good place there. Oh yeah, that's looking a lot better. Still some problems. I mean, there's a lot we could sit here and just tweak all night long in terms of these lines, you know. But I think we're getting to a place where we've kind of sort of got everything looking where it needs to be at the same sort of level here. So I think we're getting there. Okay. Getting a little bit too aggressive now. Taking away too much of that form, because as we rotate around to the front, we can tell that we're messing up that silhouette, so we don't want to do that. The same problem with their chin from the front. It needs to be wider. Alright guys, I think that's where I'm going to end it tonight. I'm going to save this, upload it to the link in the description. If you guys want to see it, play with it, do whatever you want with it, that's fine. It's there for you guys to kind of pick up and learn. And if you want to pick up next week, join me. We're going to be doing part 3 and just continuing to refine this and getting it to a better place. So you can download those. You got to use the 2.8 alpha to make that work. So don't try to open this up in 2.79 because it's not going to work. Yeah, that's about it. So I hope you guys had fun tonight. A little bit long, but that's fine. And I will see you guys again next week at 7 p.m. Now, there's another thing I really want to mention that is a very cool thing that's coming up this month. There's another link in the description. And if you guys are into doing 3D illustrations with Blender, I've got a boot camp that is launching on Cyber Monday. So if you're looking for an awesome Christmas gift for someone else or for yourself, then definitely consider getting a spot in this boot camp. It's going to be an 8-week intense, week by week content, full-blown course, but it's also going to have mentorship inside of it. So not only are you going to get an intense, illustration-based experience where I walk you through how to create full-blown 3D illustrations in Blender, but you're also going to get activities that walk you through how to get started learning how to tell stories, turn those into concepts, learn how to put together really awesome 3D models with age and with grit and make them look realistic. And then we're going to talk about how to turn those into full-blown illustrations with an entire environment. So you're not going to want to miss that. It's the last thing I'm doing this year that's really, really big. It's going to be a huge launch, and I really want to see you guys inside because it's going to be a lot of fun. So there's a link in the description. Just go to that link and sign up, and that'll let you know when it launches. And you're going to get 3 free video tutorials that are going to be delivered straight to your inbox, sort of 3 or 4 days apart as I get those done. So that's going to be leading up to the launch. It's all free to get those videos. All you got to do is sign up to let me know you're interested. And I'm not going to share your email. I'm not going to bother you. I'm just going to send you a few emails with some free stuff, and let me know after that if you want to be in the boot camp. So you guys have a great night. Have a great weekend. Stay safe out there. If it's cold where you are like it is here, then stay warm, and I'll see you guys again next week. Thanks for hanging out.